Today we'll be exploring the grammar of sentence structure, but first, I want to start a new tradition for humanities. Wonderful words. Some days before our lesson, we'll take a few moments to explore the rich, beautiful words from around the world, from languages far flung across our beautiful planet. The source is a book called What a Wonderful Word, a collection of untranslatable words from around the world, prepared by Nicola Edwards and Luisa Uribe. You might wonder how you can have a collection of untranslatable words and give translations for them. Is there any word from any language that is really untranslatable? A word that cannot be changed from one language to the next? Maybe, maybe not. But whereas the English word blue, for example, becomes azul in Spanish and mavi in Turkish, and so on, some words just don't have simple one-word translations. Sometimes this is because the words are tied to a specific way of life. You probably won't often be searching for something in the water, using only your feet, if you live in a New York skyscraper, for example. There is a word in the Wagaman language of Australia, however, that means just that. It's called morma. On the other hand, an untranslatable word might be just the thing to describe something we're all familiar with. Who hasn't had to move scalding or burning food around one's mouth while trying to cool it down enough to eat it? Why don't we all have a word for that? Who knows? But isn't it wonderful that somewhere in the world one exists? The word is pelinti, and it comes from Boli, a language from Ghana. Glorious Ghana. Untranslatable words, then, are great examples of how beautiful language can be. It can always surprise and teach us new things about ourselves, each other, and the world. It tells us what an interesting mix human beings are, and it reassures us that we are understood and that we're all the same on some level. It's nice, isn't it, to know that someone else has had the same feeling or experience as you and given it at long last a name of its own? And now, your first wonderful word of the day. Today's word, yök-otta. Yök-otta. Say it like it's two words, the G making a sound a little like an English Y. Yök-otta. This word comes from Swedish, and it arrives just in time for the warm weather. There's Sweden up at the north of Europe. Yök-otta means to wake up early in the morning so you can go outside to hear the first birds singing. Yök-otta literally means early cuckoo morning. On Ascension Day, a holiday in May, it's traditional for Swedes to go out first thing to hear the cuckoo birds sing, and perhaps even enjoy a picnic in the fresh air. Have you ever heard a cuckoo make its sound? In the depths of winter in some northern parts of Sweden above the Arctic Circle, you might get as little as 3 hours of sunlight per day, so Swedes deeply appreciate the long daylight hours of the summer months. Sweden is a country of beautiful scenery, and its people want to keep it that way. Only 1% of waste in Sweden ends up in a garbage dump. The rest is recycled or converted into energy. Less than 3% of Sweden's landmass is built up with cities and such, and forests still cover over 60% of the country. Plenty of space for having a leisurely yök-otta in the morning. now. Ye merry old grammar time. Sentence edition. What else would it be, When you've been sentenced to sentences for life, you try to make the most of it. Recognize that? That's a complex sentence. How do I know? Well, it's got a dependent clause.
Merry Christmas!
Today we'll be looking at all kinds of sentences in the sentence zoo, all kinds of sentence critters, complex, compound, but a new way of creating simple sentences. Today, our focus will be on two ideas: concise language and sentence variety. One other thing we'll add to it: a new way of building simple sentences with more than one predicate or more than one compound. To do this, I'd like you to join me for a very special Storytime edition of Ye Merry Old Grammar Time. You see, I've been working on a story. I think you'll like it. At least I hope you will. You see, the problem, though, is that sometimes my ideas get ahead of me, and my language isn't quite equal to it. You know, sometimes I have great ideas, but I don't know exactly how to express them in the most beautiful language. So I'm going to need your help to clean up my writing. There's a lot of extra words in there, and I think I could combine some sentences. Let me show you what I have. Once upon a time, there was a wizard named Snally. Snally lived in a magical graham cracker house. The graham cracker house was beside the Silver Lake. The Silver Lake was in the fairy forest. Snally summoned rainbows. Snally also produced toadstools. Snally used a wand. The wand was made of gnarled tree branches. The wand was also made of moss. Okay, I admit it. There's some interesting language in there. Gnarled and interesting, very specific nouns. But I think there are a lot of extra words that just don't need to be there. Well, is there a way that we could remove some of these words and combine some of the sentences to make this paragraph sparkle a little more? Let's give it a shot. Let's start at the beginning. I like that first sentence. Let's keep it. But how about the description of where Snally lives? I think I know of a way to improve that. Once upon a time, there was a wizard named Snally. Snally lived in a magical graham cracker house beside the Silver Lake in the fairy forest. Now that's much better. What do you notice about those sentences that describe Snally's home? They all have prepositional phrases. We can take sentences that have a very similar idea with many prepositional phrases and combine them into one. It has a nice rhythm, and it's a simple sentence. One person, Snally, doing one thing, living. Now, let's dig a little further. There's a problem. I get kind of tired of hearing Snally over and over again. There must be a way that I could take out some of the Snallys and still have readers who understand who I'm talking about. One solution is to just find another way of describing Snally. A phrase like, this powerful creature. I could also use a pronoun. Notice the next two sentences both involve Snally. She's doing different things. I'll bet I could combine them into a simple sentence with more than one predicate. You may have thought that couldn't be done. Well, this powerful creature summoned rainbows and produced toadstools. You see, it's a single simple sentence with two predicates. We've combined them. More on that in a few moments. With a wand, another prepositional phrase. But then I got lost in the original paragraph describing that wand in too many sentences. I could do the same thing I did with the prepositional phrases. They're all about the wand. I could combine them into one phrase. With a wand made of gnarled tree branches and moss. This is a big improvement over my original paragraph. By bringing together related phrases, replacing some of the subjects, with phrases like a powerful creature or pronouns like she, and combining prepositional phrases, I've taken out a lot of the extra words, a lot of the nouns that get repeated. Look at how much space I have at the bottom. I've cut out a lot, and it sounds better. This is something called writing in concise manner, concise language. Concise language means writing that avoids unnecessary words. We say something is concise if it avoids repeating things. Snally lived in a magical graham cracker house. The graham cracker house was beside the Silver Lake. The Silver Lake was in the fairy forest. Well, you see, graham cracker and Silver Lake both get repeated too many times. Too many words. A more concise or shorter way to say it: she lived in a magical graham cracker house beside the Silver Lake in the fairy forest. I've cut out nearly 2 lines. Do you notice something else about what I did? I got rid of Snally. I used a pronoun. This is much more concise. That means it is shorter by using fewer unnecessary words. Really, I think all of those words are very important, and I think it's just the right balance. The other idea that we'll explore today, something that my revised paragraph accomplished, is something called sentence variety. Writing that uses several kinds of sentence structures is said to have excellent variety. That means it's varied. It's diverse. I might begin a paragraph with a short sentence such as this: there was a wizard named Snally. It's simple and it's short. Snally lived in a magical graham cracker house beside the Silver Lake in the fairy forest. It's a simple sentence, but it's a little longer. You may notice a pattern here. We can actually add a great deal of variety or different structures by using the same kinds of sentences. Both of these sentences are simple because they have one subject doing one thing. But notice how one sentence is longer than the next, than the last. If we had a whole bunch of short sentences back to back, it might sound a little clunky. This adds a little style by changing up the length of the sentences while keeping the same structure, simple sentences with lots of extra things. This powerful creature summoned rainbows and produced toadstools with a wand made of gnarly tree branches and moss. This is still a simple sentence, but as you'll see in a moment, it has 2 predicates, and it's even longer than the previous 2 sentences, the sentences that came before. It's like a snowball. We started small and got bigger and bigger, each sentence adding more and more details. But if we go too much further, it might become a little difficult to read, so we could end our paragraph with another very short sentence. Snally was quite delightful. It's like a short, simple sentence sandwich. In between the pieces of bread are 2 long, elegant sentences. Now, we're going to talk about a new idea today, how simple sentences can show sentence variety, have different structures by having more than one subject or more than one predicate. But more on that in a few moments. Let's look again at one more example that shows sentence variety and concise language. This time, we'll look at sentence variety in which every sentence has a different style. One is simple, then compound, and then complex. You'll see. Here's our original. Snally was the guardian of the fairy forest. Snally also had many hobbies. Singing to the toadstools was her favorite hobby. Singing to the toadstools filled her with immense pleasure. She also profoundly enjoyed talking to the trees. Snally never talked too much. Snally never talked too much because she didn't want to bore the trees. Okay, it's maybe a little too much, huh? I'll bet you noticed that I did some things well. Immense pleasure, there's a powerful descriptive adjective. Profoundly is an adverb that means deeply. But where I went wrong, I think, was repeating too many of the same words. This time, let's get rid of the extra words that aren't needed and show sentence variety at the same time. But rather than using only simple sentences, we're going to use a nice mixture of simple, compound, and complex. Let's take the first 2 sentences. There's a kind of contrast there. On the one hand, Snally has an important, serious job as a guardian of the fairy forest. On the other hand, she also has many hobbies. Let's see if we can combine them with a conjunction that shows contrast. Think back to last week's sentence of the day. Although Snally was the guardian of the fairy forest, she had many hobbies. You recognize that? It's a complex sentence. The independent clause, she had many hobbies. It's also a lot shorter than the dependent clause. There's variety within variety. Now, the next two sentences are about singing to the toadstools. I'll bet there's a way that we can combine them in another simple sentence. Singing to the toadstools, her favorite hobby, filled her with immense pleasure. What's going on there? What's that in red? It's in a positive phrase. We know that singing to the toadstools filled her with pleasure, and it's her favorite hobby. We've kept the same subject, singing, and the same predicate, verb, filled. We've just added in a positive to describe more about her singing. And we've used a different style, a different structure of sentence. We've gone from complex to simple. Let's see if we can make the next one compound. She also profoundly enjoyed talking to the trees, but she never talked too much. We have two simple sentences combined with a simple conjunction, but. And notice how the first simple sentence of this compound is longer than the second. Variety within variety. We've already shown, in the space of 3 sentences, 3 different structures. This is turning out to be quite an interesting sentence, an interesting paragraph. Let's close it. Let's put the bread on the sandwich. After all, she didn't want to bore them. Notice that I didn't repeat the word trees. It's more concise to use a pronoun. And I ended with a simple sentence. But this one has a transitional phrase. After all, it shows that we've come to the end. We can take simple sentences like she didn't want to bore them and dress them up with transitional phrases, appositives, and prepositional phrases. It's a very elegant way to add variety while still using a mixture of simple and compound and complex sentences. This shows variety because it represents all 3 of the main structures that we've learned, and within those structures, there's changes from one part to the next. The first dependent clause is a little longer than the independent clause in our first sentence, and even our final short, simple sentence has a lovely transitional phrase. This shows a lot of variety, a lot of differences from one sentence to the next. There's an excellent way to visualize the other idea we've talked about. Do you see that big space at the bottom of the page on the right? Well, look at all that empty space. We cut out so many words that we have this huge space at the bottom. That tells us that this new paragraph is more concise. It avoids or stays away from unnecessary words. There's one other way to add variety while still using simple sentences along with our complex and compound ones. You've already seen it a couple of times. I want to show you in greater detail now. It might take a few days, maybe a week or 2 for you to become really comfortable with this, so it's okay if you're not quite mastering it today. Well, here are 2 sentences. There's 2 simple sentences. You may have noticed that they have the same subject. Snally. In these 2 sentences, she's performing 2 different actions. Don't believe me? Look at it this way. Here's Snally. She's summoning rainbows and producing toadstools. This is 2 sentences. Can you see how we can combine them while still having a simple sentence? It's quite easy. Oh, I should say straightforward. That's a bit of a cliche. Snally summoned rainbows and produce toadstools. One simple sentence with 2 predicates. You've actually seen this quite a bit before, and I've heard you use it many times in your speech to me. This is still a simple sentence because it has only one subject, but that subject is working overtime, doing 2 different things. We call this a compound predicate. It's a simple sentence with 2 or more predicates with the same subject. I find that a little confusing, So one way that I remember a compound predicate is still simple, I call it a combined predicate. If that helps you, give that a shot. Think of it as a simple sentence with combined predicates. I'll bet you can anticipate what I'm going to show you next. If we can combine predicates, can't we also combine subjects? Here are two simple sentences with the same predicate, the same action. But here, two different creatures are performing that action. There are two different subjects. Both of them love to listen to Snally. Who are they? Well, the toadstools and the trees. We can combine them by just adding a conjunction. The toadstools and the trees love to listen to Snally. We've cut out a lot of extra words by making a single simple sentence with two subjects. That's called a compound subject. Now, I find that confusing. It's still a simple sentence. I want to remember that, and I get confused between compound and simple sentences. So here, I think of the subjects as being combined. I hope you still enjoy my stories. I hope you don't think they're too silly. You may have outgrown them. Well, maybe so. Maybe you can think of that word from your thesaurus that means they're just a little too sweet, just a little too cute. Maybe. By the way, that's a toadstool, in case you were wondering. And so is that. You may have recognized these sentences with the combined subjects and combined predicates. You would have seen them last week in your paperless warm-up. Remember that on Thursday and in class before the spring break. You would have danced your heart out to a sentence like this. My llama cooked, cleaned, and mowed the lawn this morning. We established or showed that this was a simple sentence because it's one subject doing different things. This too is a simple sentence. It just so happens to have 62 different creatures all doing one thing, having lunch together. Anyway, today you're going to explore concise language, language that avoids unnecessary words, and sentence variety. That means paragraphs that use all three kinds of structures we've explored, and within those structures, you now have a way of expanding your simple sentences by combining simple sentences with the same subject or with the same predicate. Combined predicates, combined subjects. Of course, by now, all of your sentences should now have prepositional phrases, descriptive phrases, adjectives, adverbs, appositives, or transitional phrases like after all, or therefore, or in conclusion. I'll bet you didn't know I could go back and forth in this book. So, we've looked at concise language, language that avoids unnecessary words, probably not a word that describes this lesson, sorry guys, and sentence variety, paragraphs that show many kinds of sentence structures, and within those structures, variation or changes from one part of the sentence to the next. And of course, you've now mastered combining these sentences with rich phrases, adjectives, adverbs, and appositives. Your assignment this week is to take a final paragraph of mine and change it into a glistening, gloriously concise, and varied composition. This is the paragraph. Glarf was an enchanted turnip. Glarf lived in the ground. The ground where Glarf lived was in an old graveyard. The graveyard was beside a castle. Glarf had no eyes. Glarf had no ears. Glarf could see by poking his leaves above the ground. Glarf could listen by sensing vibrations in the earth. Glarf enjoyed listening to wind. The wind whispered. The leaves trembled when the wind whispered. Glarf noticed that. Looking at the world gave Glarf pleasure. Listening to the world also gave Glarf pleasure. Glarf was a very observant turnip. Oh boy, there's a lot there, but I'll bet you could make it much simpler and much better to read. Oh, in case you don't know what a turnip is, it's my favorite root vegetable. Here's your assignment. You'll have the rest of the week to do this. Take your time. Improve the paragraph about Glarf. Rewrite the paragraph both to be more concise and to have greater sentence variety. Make your improved paragraph more concise by combining sentences and removing unnecessary words, especially nouns, and repetitions. Show greater sentence variety by using a mixture of simple, complex, and compound sentences, as well as appositive and prepositional phrases, and simple sentences that have combined subjects and predicates. You may add or remove words to your revised paragraph, but you should not change the basic details about Glarf and his home. In other words, your paragraph should carry the same basic idea as the original, only with better language. That means you can't move Glarf to Mars. There's nothing in the original paragraph that says that he's from Mars. And instead of a graveyard, you can't make it a roller skating rink. Sorry about that. However, there are some words that you're welcome to change. Here's a checklist that shows the staggering variety of different ways to combine sentences. Don't be alarmed. Try to include as many elements as you can, but it's okay if you don't get all of them. And feel free to remove cliches. I can already see a few in my paragraph. And you can add lush descriptive language and a few additional details, again, as long as you keep the basic sense of Glarf and his world. I've placed stars next to the 3 items that are the most important on this list. Try to include a variety of sentences and phrases. That's your assignment. But before you go, let's see if you know anything about anything, and let's get your body moving. Stand up. Let's see if you can tell me about sentences with combined subjects and predicates. Your first choice? Your second choice. Here we go. Magic radishes and slimy toadstools dance in the moonlight. Magic radishes and toadstools are 2 different subjects doing the same thing? Yeah, you got it. Surf your way on into... No, that's a compound subject. Compound subject. Blorag the boulder bounced bold and bounded down the brown hill. Lots of bees there. Blorag the boulder, one person doing 3 different things. Now this is a chance for you to surf. That's a compound predicate. Glix, an earth wizard, wiggled his fingers, mumbled a few words, and cast a powerful spell. Guess what? It's a simple sentence. But don't be tricked. It's a compound predicate. There's only one subject, Glix. It just happens to have an appositive. Quim casts fire spells, but Squam casts water spells. This one was a trick. It's not simple at all. You notice that conjunction? This is 2 simple sentences in a compound. Although Frem is a wizard, he only knows 1 spell. Sorry, I did it again. It's complex. It has a dependent clause. One more, for the road. Zamlux, Snock, and Klob, the sorcerers of Ix, cast spells and perform experiments at Castle Granks. 3 subjects, and each doing 3 predicates. It's both compound subject and compound predicate. I hope you did well. So, remember, you're going to explore concise and varied language. You'll use a variety of different sentence structures and many phrases, adjectives, and adverbs. You're going to redesign my excellent paragraph. I admit it, it's really not excellent yet. You're going to take a decent idea and make it into an excellent one. You're going to try to include as many elements as you can. Oh, one more thing. We saw 2 new words today, concise and variety, although I'll bet a lot of you already knew these words. Concise, the adjective, and variety, the noun. Ooh, notice that? Yeah, it's a morpheme issue. See how it has that special ending that tells us that it's an abstract noun. So here's my question for you. What if I wanted to take the adjective concise and turn it into an abstract noun? Can you think of a way to do that with morphemes? It sounds like a job for the parts of speech fairy. I'll bet you were thinking just that. Add that ION, that special SION adjective ending to make it an abstract noun. It means the quality of being concise or showing brevity. Oh, do you see it there? Brev. Can you think of what that means, that Latin root? Oh yeah, and there's another morpheme. That tells us it's a noun. And how about variety with its abstract noun ending? Can we turn this into an adjective? It's as simple as just changing the ending. Varied is now an adjective, showing great variety, diverse, differing from others. What's going on here? That doesn't really make any sense.